Thank you for taking the time to join us today, and welcome to the launch of As Memories Fade. This is our series of books that look to capture the memories and reminiscences before they are lost in the course of time. The format for today's event has been taken into account the current restrictions that are posted upon us, but we still hope this will capture the essence of the book. We'll be able to take any questions that you have at a later date or at the end of this meeting. You need to post them to us by text or by email, and that information will be given to you. Some of our authors are now going to share with you excerpts from their stories. But first, as an introduction to the idea of As Memories Fade, Aubrey Rose, CBE, will give you a brief talk.
A foreword looks ahead, yet the contributors to this unusual and valuable book all look back, not merely to a generation or so, but to the depths of the 20th century. The last 100 years have been and remain a turbulent century, stretching from poison gas in 1914 to 18 to atomic bombs 30 years later. Yet it has also provided some good things, great medical progress alongside unthinkable technical advances, from penicillin to World Wide Web. To reflect all that has happened in a single book based on the memories of the contributors is not possible, but this is a brave attempt to reflect what individuals recall, a personalised look at the pluses and minuses of past times, recorded by a variety of folk, and that is its value. It takes us back to other times, to the foundation of our present world. It might even give us a clue as to our future. One could almost paraphrase Churchill's words: never in the course of history has there been so many changes in such a short time. And of course, as you go from story to story, this is what each chapter reflects and confirms. The publishers have done a service to capture in print memories before they fade, as they certainly will, for memories are an intrinsic part of life in all spheres. In communal affairs, memories have recently created a worldwide eruption, memories that extend beyond the individual. In religious life, age-old memories are so often reenacted in ceremonies at home and in communal prayer. In a lighter vein, there is Bob Hope's Thanks for the Memory, extending to Maurice Chevalier's Ah Yes, I Remember It Well. Wider music compositions are full of souvenirs, just as national memories are evoked annually at the Cenotaph in London and elsewhere. Indeed, the terrible Nazi Holocaust is recalled in memories and ceremonies worldwide. Memories are an intrinsic part of us as human beings, and this book gives personal expression to a wide variety of memories, keeping them alive before the spirit drifts away. The personal stories take us from industry to wartime, from exile to income tax of all things, from adventure on the high seas to prison camps to peaceful villages. It is a broad picture of the world seen through the memories of a variety of folk. They may, as time passes, fade within us, but here they are given honour and life. Good luck as you share the memories of a wide variety of folk, recalling the years of yesterday before they grow dim.
Our first extract will be read to you by Denise Knowles, and it relates to her great uncle who fought in the Royal Navy during the First World War.
The 20th century began with one of the country's most horrendous calamities, World War I. Most of us still have some distant knowledge of our family's experience of this war, but generally these are second, third or fourth hand, and like Chinese whispers, the truth begins to get more and more distorted. My story is third hand, told by my mother, who was told it by her mother, the story of my great-uncle William Armin, who drowned at sea some 6 months into World War I. It wasn't until I started looking into the truth of the tale that I found it involved not only my great-uncle, but 270 plus other lost souls, seafarers whose lives could have been saved had a government not been so desperate to be seen as ruling the waves, and by those in authority who had serious concerns but who did not speak out strongly enough. William, born in 1892, was the third son of John Thomas and Alice Armin. He began his working life with his father, a ship's riveter, on the docks in West Hartlepool, as had his brother John Joseph, my grandfather. Both William and his older brother had stints working as rivet heaters, but neither son seemed to want to emulate their father. Perhaps coming home exhausted, dirty, and with a head filled with the noise of clanging steel was not the life they wanted. As young lads eager for wider horizons and adventure, they both decided to join the forces. John left first and joined the Durham Light Infantry, while William decided to join the Royal Navy. William had grown up by the docks in West Hartlepool. He had been around ships and shipping all his life. His uncle, also his namesake, was a stoker on a steamship. Maybe this has inspired the young William to join the Navy and to see the world. But, writing these words, I can imagine the frustration William was feeling. 2 years had passed and still he hadn't travelled far from British shores. His behaviour and progress up to this point had been very good, and he was now 19. William had been aboard his next ship, the Halcyon, for 2 months when the ship docked at Grimsby. On the night of the 25th of November, when the vessel was in dock, William disappeared from his ship and was not recovered until the 25th of February the following year. The reason he ran is uncertain, but could it be that this was when William first met and fell in love with his future wife, Florence Whiteley? Perhaps fate had decreed that a night on the town with the boys took a more romantic turn. And what could he have been doing for 3 months? Where was he staying? After William was finally apprehended, he was sent to the Pembroke Naval Base in Chatham, where he was sentenced to 28 days for the desertion. Curiously, 23 days after his release, on the 30th of March 1912, he married Florence Mary Whiteley at St John's Church, Newquay. The marriage certificate shows their residence at the time to be Hilliard Street in Grimsby. Both parties declared their fathers as deceased. This was most certainly untrue for William, but clearly showed the haste with which the pair wanted to tie the knot.
Of course, not all stories are to deal with the war. The following is from Aubrey Rose, and it's about somebody who had a very interesting approach to taxation.
The taxman cometh. I came across a man who worked in a tax office. He was an ordinary man, but blessed or cursed with a rare sense of fantasy. He applied his poetic imagination to prosaic financial assessments and rebates. In the process, he caused tremors in the heart of the British tax system. Here was a man who had left his native Pakistan to pan for gold in the streets of London. He came as an immigrant, borne along by the waves of population that swept into post-1945 Britain. For Britain then was an open society. A British subject could move in and out freely. He simply waved his passport and pronounced in the best imperial accent, "Civis Britannicus sum," and in he came. There he was, sitting quietly but apprehensive, in his 40, average height, black eyes, black hair, yielding somewhat to the extension of time, long arms and large spreading expressive hands, and a peculiar habit of tilting his head as he spoke. In the next few months I got to know him well. He had admirable qualities, especially love for his family. His story, later told publicly, had a touch of Eastern fantasy. It gradually unfolded as the legal machine got underway. My friend from Pakistan, like so many from that subcontinent, had a feeling for figures, numbers. This could have led him into an accountant's or cashier's office. Instead, he was welcomed as a clerk by Her Majesty's Inspector of Taxes. The Queen may not have known her new obedient servant, but he worked assiduously, progressed from section to section, until he understood the whole persecutory process that annually immutably afflicts the ordinary citizen. As my tax-collecting client worked daily, watching the great inward movement of money, in response to the letters and forms that poured out from his office, an idea began to take shape in his lively mind. He never saw it as a guilty idea. He never used that word in all our conversations. Why, he felt, should he not enter into partnership with the inspector? The latter had a monopoly on tax collecting. Why should a little free enterprise not penetrate this financial closed shop? Using his extensive procedural knowledge, he devised a scheme of unbelievable audacity. Our gatherers of tax sometimes have to return overpayments to the long-suffering public, which they do with studied reluctance and little sense of urgency. The magic word is rebate. He can call for a rebate, a repayment of some of the money sucked from him by the system. In the names of disappearing citizens, he wrote a series of letters claiming rebates. The letters came to him. He wrote back querying the claim. He replied to himself with details. The files grew and grew. Various handwriting styles emerged from different parts of London. The bizarre correspondence continued until eventually, in most cases, he agreed the rebates claimed, or some lesser sum, thought not too much less. The payments had to be cleared through banks, thus ensured a series of friendly visits to widely separated bank managers and the opening of new accounts, one per cheque. The merry game continued. The prime example of free enterprise prospered, a cuckoo in a tax inspector's nest, dispatching a series of golden eggs. The future looked assured. Then suddenly, by chance, one of the dead claimants came to life. An innocent letter, a search for a file, a puzzled chief inspector, and lo and behold, a 6-year campaign of deception came to light.
This section is all about what it's like to write one of the stories for As Memories Fade. It is something that we all experience during the course of the development of this project, and there are numerous stories and interesting experiences that occur as you put pen to paper or finger to keyboard.
My name is Stephen Lane. I've been asked to talk not about my story itself, but about the process of writing it, what it was like from the writer's point of view. My story was about my Uncle Henry. I'd known very little of him, and most of what I thought I knew turned out to be a mixture of half-truths, misunderstandings, and some well-meaning fabrications. Uncle Henry had died as a Japanese prisoner of war, working on the Burma Railway. Fact. But that was about it. He had fought fascism both on the streets of London and in the Spanish Civil War. Or he had fought for fascism in the East End and abroad. Or he had done neither. Most of this I got from his brothers and sisters, and if his own generation didn't know, what chance did I have of finding out? As members of the family passed, so the likelihood of finding the truth about Henry's story became even more remote. A man with strong beliefs would be lost in time, with no one knowing what those beliefs were. Two things prompted me to pick up the few threads that existed. One was the chance finding of some of his letters while clearing out my aunt's flat. The other was as memories fade. The latter gave me an incentive to research the story in depth, with the prospect of being able to publish the results professionally, to create a proper record of Henry's life. A full-length book would have been too daunting, and I would have struggled to gather enough material. But a short story, capturing those key moments, well, that was manageable. The journey was enthralling, with leaps forward, steps back and strokes of luck. As each part of Henry's story unravelled, so I was drawn deeper into the history surrounding the fall of Singapore. Each new discovery was a feeling of achievement, finding where he went, how he got there, and what happened. The boost that arrived with uncovering each stage had to be tempered with the knowledge that things had ended badly for him. As I looked deeper, I was amazed at the amount of information that was available, online, in the archives, or previously published. Nothing was straightforward. Many official records were lost, and you had to get accustomed to the fact that A, there are no facts, well, not many. B, sometimes information is contradictory or just plain wrong. And C, family accounts are just the same or worse. You have to make calls. What is the most likely account? How did they know? Did they have an axe to grind? This works just the same for big history, VIPs and major events, as for little history. You have to be true to the person and not try to shape them in a way that sits well with your own beliefs. The editing out of any inconvenient truths diminishes the person you're writing about. The portrait needs to be warts and all, or not at all. Also, you're not alone. Apart from family and friends, there are others who may have information that can help. I joined FIPO, the Far East Prisoner of War Association, and that provided information on Henry's movements during the last year of his life. When are you finished? It's difficult to say. I circulated my final draft around the family and had to make further additions and deletions. I eventually thought I knew enough about Henry to tell what I could in a way that I thought he would recognise. I felt it had been a worthwhile and satisfying experience writing his story. I hope Henry would have thought the same.
The following extract is from Jim Lewis, and it reflects on a part of his life.
Morning of the 28th of May 1935, Jack Pennington heard the first cries of his new half-brother coming from the open bedroom window in a small stone cottage as District Nurse O'Hara delivered baby James Harry Lewis into an anxious world that was gradually edging toward World War II. Nurse O'Hara, in a navy blue uniform of raincoat and matching round hat, who everyone in town of Newton Stewart in County Tyrone, Northern Ireland, would immediately recognise. She had travelled the 3 miles from Newton Stewart on her autocycle, an early form of moped that is, by the way, arriving at Millbrook Cottage, a whitewashed building with no electricity, gas or running water on the Strabane Road, to carry out a task that she would have no doubt done many times. The mother of the newborn baby was Leonora Maud Pennington, and the father was Walter Henry Portman Lewis, known familiarly as Harry. Harry, a popular international musical artist, and Leonora, a gifted soprano, have travelled to Northern Ireland from London around 1934 with Leonora's 2 sons, John, Jack, and William, Bill, and her father Frederick Britton. Leonora's husband, John Harold Pennington, had returned from the Great War suffering shell shock. now known more accurately as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, becoming an extremely violent man. For his violent outbursts and also his attempt on my mother's life, he was sectioned and committed to Claybury Mental Hospital at Woodford Bridge in Essex. The poor chap continued his violent ways by assaulting the male nurses and other inmates. He finally took his own life in 1937 after consuming barbed wire that led to peritonitis. After Harold's death, my parents, Leonora and Harry, were married in a small Methodist chapel on the outskirts of Newton Stewart. To provide for the family, Harry had rented a small shop in Main Street, Newton Stewart, selling second-hand clothes, which mainly consisted of discarded post office uniforms. These he purchased from a wholesaler located in Markhouse Road, Walthamstow, in the East End of London. Trade was never brilliant, but when Dad was busiest, when the farmers came into town on days when the whole of Main Street was turned into a rather pungent, excrement underfoot cattle market, with cows breaking away from their owners and madly charging around causing havoc. Here, rosy-cheeked farmers could be seen sealing their buying and selling deals by spitting on the palm of their hands and shaking them. Mum and Dad further supplemented the family pot by putting on evening entertainment around Northern Ireland, performing comedy sketches, monologues, piano playing and singing. Occasionally, a film show would be added to the mix. While this was going on, Grandfather Fred was earning his keep as babysitter to Jack, Bill and little Jim. That's me, of course.
Our final reading today is about two brothers and their escape from Czechoslovakia. One to the east and one to the west. This will be read by Celia Cousins.
I'm reading from Two Brothers, which is a true story, about two brothers who had to leave Czechoslovakia, as it was then, in their resistance against the occupation. Decisions had to be made quickly, and, after a rushed evening visit to say goodbye to his family, Pavel returned to Komárno, which was well known to him and afforded a suitable exit point. Having been advised to keep his home visit secret, he had told no one of his escape route, and his destination was unknown even to him. As an 18-year-old, fit young man, there must have been a feeling of adventure, even though he was to quickly find out this was an adventure that would start rather badly. The most obvious route for Pavel was to travel through Hungary, making use of the language learned as a child. The first safe country along the envisaged route was Yugoslavia, and from there his hopes were of reaching Turkey, Lebanon, or other Middle East countries from where he might get to France. The Skoda official gave him the name of an ex-Skoda employee who was helping Czechs to join as French legionnaires at the French consulate in Budapest, then assisting them to reach Belgrade. The French government was not yet at war and was using the French Foreign Legion as a recruitment channel in an attempt to dilute the significant number of Germans serving in the Legion. This escape route became increasingly dangerous as Hungary moved to join the Axis powers, and the southern route itself was cut off by the German invasion of Yugoslavia, which began on the 6th of June 1941. However, in late 1938 the policing was rudimentary and relatively unorganised. The relationship with Czechoslovakia further deteriorated when in November 1938 the southern part of Slovakia was being threatened by Hungary. This, on the 23rd of March 1939, would culminate in what was known as the Little War. To a teenager, escape seemed straightforward. All Pavel needed to do was cross the border, reach to Budapest, visit the French embassy, become a member of the French Foreign Legion, travel by train to Yugoslavia, and eventually arrive in France to fight the Germans. Underground operations were helping those wishing to escape, and after some discussion the plan was to use his excellent Hungarian and travel by train to Budapest, where he would be met and taken to the French embassy. The Skoda contact suggested he might work in unison with 2 other Slovaks who were attempting to escape by the same route. The proposed plan was for Pavel to travel with one who had no knowledge of Hungarian, and in close attendance would be the second individual, who had a reasonable command of the language. Dressed as Hungarian labourers, they were to leave the following day, travel by foot to a village station across the border, and catch the train to Budapest. Many Hungarians disliked the escapees and their reasons for leaving. This was not only because of latent support for Hitler's Nazi movement, but also an opportunity to get some retribution for the loss of territory to Czechoslovakia in 1918. Any unfortunate escapees who were caught were arrested, put in holding compounds or jail, and extradited back to the country of origin. This often meant being handed over to the Gestapo and imprisoned or sometimes killed. The advisor suggested that he might work in tandem with 2 other Slovaks who were attempting the same route. The party arrived at the station with time to spare, and Pavel bought 2 single tickets before walking back to the lone escapee and passing the change to him for the purchase of a single ticket to Budapest. Whilst waiting for the train to arrive, they sat separately to avoid suspicion, but very soon became aware of increased activity within the station, followed by the doors being pulled to. Suspecting there might be a problem, they moved towards the platform that bordered on fields, but it was not long before their worst fears were confirmed. The local police and militia mounted the platform to try and take all 3 into custody. Pavel would never see his 2 travelling companions again, but managed to escape to the fields and spent the night in nearby woods, only to be captured early the next morning by some local farmers and summarily turned over to the Hungarian military authorities.
Now, what can we say about the future of As Memories Fade and the very series? We hope we've given you a flavour of the book, and we're currently in production of Volume 2. We're looking for people to submit their stories. They're clearly following the lines of what we've already done. The stories should be of a personal interest, either family or friends. It should be written no more than 5,000 words. There can be black and white photographs included in that. We are expecting a small contribution. This contribution is £250 towards the cost of publication. As a result of this, you're going to receive 10 books and you will receive 2% share of any interest that is generated. If you have any queries, please contact us. You can find our details on As Memories Fade page of the Libri Publishing website. Thank you.